if you don't know, my last name is with a
Oh,
long A, so Akerman.
all right. Hey guys, it is noon on Monday here on the West Coast. So, you know what that means? It means it's time for content chat. And today we're going to be talking about something that is either amazingly awesome or amazingly scary, depending upon how recently you activated the Google Analytics for tracking on your website. So, to unravel all of the things that you need to know in order to get the most out of Google Analytics 4, I have Kyle Akerman here as our guest to share everything he's learned over this past year of us gearing up for and now finally having Google Analytics 4 foisted upon us. So, Kyle, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for inviting me, Erica. This is this is a hot topic. Since UA has officially shut off, I think for pretty much everyone, now we have to use GA4, and people are scrambling to figure out how to use it.
Right. And I think part of it too is so many of our tools that we used, including like a lot of the SEO tools and a lot of the content planning tools, they were so reliant on the old UA feeds, and they didn't really kind of figure out how they were going to update their reporting for the Analytics 4 until, oh, I don't know, maybe like the last month or so. And I think that's left people now as they're trying to do their Q3 final reporting or starting to look at the numbers for the year for the 2024 planning. Everyone's kind of scrambling and saying, oh my gosh, I can't compare this year's numbers to last year's because we didn't activate Google Analytics 4 ahead of time, even though I'm sure that you, like me, advised clients to ASAP add the tracking so that way they wouldn't lose a whole year of being able to do comparative analytics. But I'm pretty sure that, a lot of folks were too busy and waited until it got shut off. And so now folks are hair on fire a little bit about it.
Yeah. People, if you start, because you could have started it maybe, I forget how far back, 3, maybe even 4 years ago it was available. And if you had started it any time before last July 1st or like a year ago, then you would have at least a full year of historic GA4 data to start comparing against. So yeah, it's a little tricky because it is a different data model than UA. So you can't combine the data, which is unfortunate.
Totally. All right, so that's the intro for those of you who are familiar with Google Analytics. But I do want to take a step back for the folks who maybe haven't used it previously or have been using other tools for tracking their website analytics. And I was hoping you could just sort of at a high level explain to those folks why Google Analytics is helpful for content marketers to prove their value.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually valuable for all marketers, but specific to content marketers, I mean, at a high level, you can see like which content you're creating is the most popular, like what's getting consumed. And then you can also see how people are finding that content, so if you've got a blog page, that has all, your resources, you can see, are people finding it through organic search, or are they coming from LinkedIn, or, your monthly newsletter, or maybe even ads, however you're either driving traffic there or people are finding you on your own, it's a great way to see how people find the content. And then you can also see what people do after they view the content, like, are those people more likely to sign up for your newsletter, fill out a contact us form, sign up for a demo, whatever the conversion might be, so those are kind of the high level things that make it useful.
So what do you consider then to be kind of like the buckets of like the biggest insights that for content marketing that you would be able to glean by using GA4 that you might not have been able to get through any other kinds of tools that you have?
I think, I mean, there's a couple things you can, so there's, seeing which traffic sources drive the most traffic, just pure volume, but then you can also kind of see what's maybe the best traffic source for your content. Google added in this new GA4, they added some engagement metrics to help marketers kind of make it a little bit easier to decide, how people are engaging with their content. So that's a good one. It's easier to see the path that people take on your website. So whether that starts with a piece of content or maybe that's in the middle of their journey, there's different ways to see how people kind of move through your site. And then, as I mentioned, what do they do, like maybe after consuming their content? Like you could create a segment of people that, just call them like blog viewers and compare them versus non-blog viewers and see if there's any behavioral difference in, like, maybe do some of those people become leads, that kind of thing. So those are some of the insights I think you can derive from it. It's especially good to look at where you're spending money. So, I mean, the easiest example is, are you promoting your content through paid ads?
Right.
If so, you want to know how that's working. Or if you're just spending a lot of money, creating content, because obviously there's a cost of your writing team, anyone that's doing research, if you're doing like design elements, those are all costs. So it'd be nice to know if you're getting organic traffic from that stuff too. So
yeah,
that's some of the stuff that can be useful.
I agree with all of that. I think one of the things that can be most difficult, though, like for you and I, we're geeks, we love the data. We will download a spreadsheet and cut data a bunch of different ways to try to figure out, which content needs updating, which content, needs a different call to action. But I think for a lot of marketers, if they're a little bit, let's say they're Excel adverse, and, it kind of feels overwhelming, I think it's helpful to kind of present it to them as far as like what the different use cases are. An example for one of my clients is they have a website that the primary measure of success is people downloading these PDFs. And they made the decision that because this is, it's really valuable content that they don't want to hide behind a form gate.
Right.
Because it's, they're a nonprofit and they had grant dollars attached to creating this really important content. They were struggling with figuring out, well, how many people are clicking on these links and, how many people actually downloaded the PDF after looking at it. And for them, one of the best, most compelling use cases for why they needed to make the switch as soon as possible for that site was that it was so hard for them to get that data. But now with the GA4, you can actually just see that built in without having to do anything sneaky or tricky, no hacks involved. And that was really exciting for them.
Yeah, that's one of the nice things they added in GA4. They added a bunch of like common measurements, and they call it enhanced measurement. So these are things that out of the box are just there and will be measured. So, you mentioned file downloads, specifically PDFs, but there's a file download event that will measure any download click, whether it's, I don't know, an MP3, a spreadsheet file, PDF, whatever it is, you can measure that now. And yeah, you previously had to customize that event in UA, and that took a little bit of technical knowledge. And so now you don't have to do anything. And some of those other ones they added, it now measures video interactions, only if it's YouTube, because it's a Google product. So that's in there by default. Scrolls, if somebody scrolls 90% of your page, outbound clicks, and I think like site search, if you have an internal site search. So all of those things are measured automatically now, which is pretty cool. It helps out those marketers that are a little less technical and maybe don't know how to, set it up in a tool like Google Tag Manager or something.
And I think in some organizations, if you have things pretty siloed, you as the content marketing, person are going to have access to Google Analytics, and maybe you're not going to be able to go into YouTube and see analytics there or some of the other places. So having that just, be part of your Google Analytics reporting is really such a huge quality of life improvement.
Yeah. That I think that the video thing and the file download is two things that I really love, because it was from an implementation side, especially video was a real pain in the butt to get set up. Now, I should make a comment. If your video is running through like Vimeo, or some other non-YouTube player, to measure those interactions, you do have to create custom tags. So it's nice that they added this feature, but they only made it easy for YouTube interactions. So I know a lot of B2B people use Vimeo. So
yeah,
still a little bit of work.
They have to have a carrot, right? They got to give you,
yes,
as the customer, something as a thank you. So I do love that. Are there any other kind of unique use cases you can think of for, things that you can measure that were really kind of difficult or near to impossible previously?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm just looking down at my notes now. If you want some of that like extra information around your content, so maybe like if you have multiple authors, so if you wanted to be able to pull, like the authors or maybe the date published, or maybe like a topic tag, a category tag, sometimes that could be difficult to get in a form, to get in I don't want to get too geeky, to get into a form that you could send into analytics and then see it, and like actually make sense of it. So you could map like, well, who are the top authors driving traffic and that kind of thing. So some of those more specifics were a little bit harder. And they're still kind of hard now, but you can do it. A lot of it just depends on what level of detail you need,
Which, frequently depends upon what you're being asked by your leadership team.
Well, and yeah, I was going to say to, take a step back, what you're being asked usually, revolves around what are the questions that you want to be able to answer with your data. Because I try to tell everybody that all of these tools are they help us answer our marketing questions or our business questions. So if you, start with, a list of your top 3 to 5 questions, document that, it'll be much easier to go into these tools and find the information that will answer those questions. So I really try to, like, when I'm helping people think about measurement, I try to start, with a mini strategy session, because it's like, you need a little bit of a plan on what you want to measure.
And, one of the big things that I hear a lot is, clients are trying to tie direct ROI to content. And frequently, because they're so set on first touch or last touch, because it's hard to do the stuff in between, it can end up looking like, oh, well, we don't really need to do any content marketing because people are not clicking on and booking a demo from your blog, which, as we know, is pretty short-sighted, because first of all, that's a very far down the awareness and engagement flow kind of an action to take. And to have that expectation that a blog post focused on awareness would immediately lead to that is a little sus, as the kids say. So one of the things that I would love to know is, how do we, or how easy is it for folks to go in there and set some of these other kind of conversion points, such as submitting a form, asking for information, or subscribing to a newsletter? Have they made that a little bit easier? Because I know with the UA, people were really reluctant to spend the time to go in there and set the dollar value and the conversion activities, because it just seemed like it was difficult, and it was, maybe more work than it felt like it was worth.
It's so when it comes up to, creating conversions, it's easier, but also harder. And so what I mean by that is, you have to have, so everything in this data model is an event. So it's different than UA. So every single thing you track will now be an event. So we have some of these default ones that we talked about, file download, video play, something like that. But if I wanted to measure like newsletter sign up or, sign up for a demo or something, you have to create that. So you need to know how to create that, whether it's through Tag Manager or through the GA4 interface. But once you've got the event created, turning it into a conversion is easy. You just toggle a button on. So like they made the very last step super easy. So I always tell people, even with UA, it's like try to get at least one conversion set up. It could be a macro conversion or a micro conversion, whatever. But, because conversions don't start measuring until the moment you set them up, and they're like time forward. Yep. So, you can't go back in time to see conversions. So, if you know what your conversions are, get those set up as events as soon as you can, and, then start measuring the conversions. But it does take a little bit of technical know-how. But it's not that hard. I recommend everybody do everything with Google Tag Manager. And I know that can be a little scary to work with, but there's a few simple things that you can track. Like, did you hit a certain page? You can just create an event that said, oh, I got to the newsletter thank you sign up page.
Right.
Or the thank you because I completed the sign up.
Right.
Those are pretty easy to track, or just a specific click, so if it's I don't know, a play button on your on a video or an MP3 player or something, like clicks are pretty easy to track too.
Yeah.
And then those could be your conversions. And like the file download one. So if you've got downloads on your site, you can just go into GA right now and just turn on that, look for the file download event, and then click it on as a conversion.
I think that's a really good point is, for those things that are already there and being tracked, it is that simple to set that as a conversion. And for most of us, having that content be downloaded or having somebody actually watch a video, those are important conversion points that we know help, drive that engagement and cause people to be so much more likely to buy from us. But for so many people, we have zero idea, which content is actually doing the best job of that.
Yeah, it's not easy to map specific content to a desired action unless maybe you're putting a specific call to action like right on the piece of content.
Yeah.
So an easy case would be, you put a couple paragraphs for the PDF, or say like a white paper you want to share, and maybe you put some of the text there, and then do a, hey, to read the rest of this white paper, click here to download. So in that case, you're directly trying to tie that piece of content to a specific action. But other than that kind of thing, it can be a little tricky. I'm trying to think of some other examples. I know sometimes, you can experiment with different calls to action, on your content, like maybe focus on one piece or one call to action. So if you really want everyone coming to your blog or whatever to sign up to your newsletter, then just put that, spotlight that. But if you think you could get some of those people to sign up for your demo, say if it's like a SaaS product or something, then you could experiment with putting, the demo sign up right on your content. So there's things you can do to test, but it's not always guaranteed, because a lot of times we're just creating this content to improve organic search rankings.
Yeah.
And that kind of raises every page rank on your site. So your product pages and your services pages might start to rank. So there's a lot of nuance to all of this content and measurement.
100%. So having just, done one of those big quarterly digital reporting meetings with the client, it was very apparent that, there are so many big differences between the things that we're able to report on now
Yeah.
and what we were reporting on previously. And of course, after that call, I got an email saying, "Oh yeah, so would it be possible to, compare the data from UA that we got previously to what we're getting now?" And I laughed to myself. In real time, in real life, I had a little chuckle, and I was like, "Nope, we can't, because we're tracking very different things." So I thought it would be helpful if you could give an example of, some of the big differences as we've moved towards this kind of engagement tracking model versus the old things we were tracking, which largely became, we were stymied by the fact that, direct became this huge bucket of traffic. And I can't tell you how many times I had the conversation that no, that does not mean that humans everywhere are typing in your URL because you've achieved such great brand
Right.
awareness. That it is, in fact, that is the hallmark of, they have on their privacy blockers and they're not telling you where they came from. That is the big bucket of direct traffic.
Or the one that is sad for me to see is if you have email traffic that is not UTM tagged correctly, that all goes in the direct bucket too. So I've seen companies that send a lot of email, and I can tell because you'll just see like spikes, like on the first of the month, I'm like, that's an email pattern.
You're like,
And
why wasn't
sometimes
it tagged as email?
that'll show up in direct, and then and then you look, I'm like, how many emails do you send out? They're like, oh, we send out once a week, or whatever it is. And then when I look at their visits from email, it's like 10, for like 6 months. And I'm like, yeah, you need to improve your tagging. But back to what's different. There's a lot different. The biggest thing is the way they collect data. So it's a different data model. It's an event-based data model. So it just, without getting too technical, just know that they're collecting the data differently. So that means you can't compare your GA4 data with your UA data. The only thing that might be loosely connected is those high-level metrics like page views and visits. In some cases, they're fairly close. But a lot of times you can't compare them. If you go into the tool, you'll see that the admin looks completely different. The interface. So you have to kind of learn how to navigate around the tool. And then when you're actually looking at reports, the report interfaces are different. They've renamed things. Like before, we had categories like acquisition, behavior, and conversions. Now they're called acquisition, engagement, and monetization.
Oh. And no more dashboards. A lot of us relied on those pre-built dashboards that we downloaded a million years ago.
Yeah. Those were useful for a while. I was usually more of like Looker Studio dashboards for that, but I know that those could be valuable, especially for the automation that you could do. Trying to think what else is different. So these enhanced measurements that we talk about, like that's a good difference.
Yeah.
They made some of these measurements, be there by default, which is good. They added a lot of customization features. So you can customize the reports and names of reports that are in the left-hand navigation. You can customize what's in the standard reports, like the primary dimensions and all the metrics. So there's like 10 columns of metrics. You can delete those. You can add new ones. You can reorder them. So there's a level of customization we didn't have before. They added these engagement metrics. So they're trying to help us figure out, how people are engaging with the site, kind of like that messy middle. We can figure out easily how people get to the site and we can measure the conversions, but all that stuff in the middle, can be a little tricky to track. But so they added this idea of engagement and an engaged session. So that can be if somebody's on your site for more than 10 seconds, if they go to 2 or more pages, or if they activate a conversion event. So any of those 3 happen, and then it's considered an engaged session. And then out of that, they can calculate an engagement rate, which is the number of engaged sessions over total sessions. And then engagement rate is supposed to kind of replace bounce rate as a way to measure engagement. So, I
It
get
makes
asked
more
all the
sense
time.
because I don't know about you, but trying to explain bounce rate to folks was never fun.
Yeah, yeah. So I do like this better. It's better. It's not great. There's some nuance to it, but it's definitely better. Another cool thing they added was, and again, this kind of falls in the customization bucket. There's a whole section of reports called explorations.
Mhm.
And these are, more advanced reports that you could create if the standard reports aren't giving you what you need. And 2 of them that I like, there's a path analysis report, and it's better than what was in UA. It makes it a little bit easier to see like that path that people take as they're moving through your site. And they have a forward and a reverse path, which is pretty cool. So if you wanted to see how someone got to a specific thank you page, you could look at the reverse path, start with that thank you page, and look backwards.
That's awesome.
So that's pretty useful. What else? Oh, and then for the people that are really advanced, and maybe even have like a data scientist on your team, you have access to all of your raw data. And most people, wouldn't know what to do with that, but a data scientist would. And what you can do is you can send all that GA4 data, all that raw data to a data warehouse, like BigQuery, and then you can do really high-powered number crunching on that. But that requires someone that has those skills, like knows how to do SQL calls and things like that. But previously, you never had access to your raw data
Right.
unless you owned or you paid for GA360, which was, I forget, hundreds of thousands of dollars per year. And so most people didn't have it. So
Out of the reach of most of us.
yeah, so that's probably the last big difference, I would say.
And that's really cool because I think sooner than later, a lot of us are going to have AI tools in house that we can feed those kinds of raw data files to, and that they will be able to spit out insights for us. So, I mean,
Yeah,
that's super exciting.
I think you are exactly right with that. I'm sure people are building those now. Um, and you have to be, I guess a word of warning is if you're trying to use AI to, analyze your data, make sure you're doing it like on a local AI that only lives like on your servers or your computer. Because if you push that out to like Chat GPT, like now all that data is out there. So
That's right.
especially if you're working with clients, like you don't want to put their client data out there. So
Exactly. That's a very
I'm
good
trying to
point.
be very careful with these AI tools before it's okay to do like if you wanted to just share your own data for your own blog, like that's fine. Like, I don't care if that gets out there. But, sensitive information we need to all think
100%.
about.
100%. So for folks logging into GA4 for the first time, so if you're, the content marketer, you're wanting to go in there and figure out, what you can do, what kind of reporting you need, where should they get started? What should they do first after they've gained access to and are logging in to their GA4 dashboard for the first time?
I think the easiest thing would be to start with the reports, like how did you use UA? So as a content marketer, what were the 2 to 3 reports that you always looked at in UA? And then I would try to find those in the new menu structure. So it should be pretty easy to find like the traffic report, because they still call those groups of reports acquisition. So you can go into the acquisition section and then find the report that closely matches what you used to look at to see traffic sources. And and the table itself looks similar. So I think there will be a little bit of familiarity there. Obviously, if you want to know like pages, you just want to see, your top, page views for blog content, let's say. That one's a little trickier to find, but it's in the category called engagement. But if you click on that, you'll find a report. I think it's called pages and screens or something.
Yep, pages and screens.
And the reason it says screens, I guess this is another difference in GA4, because you can have website data and app data. They've kind of, you have the power of combining that into GA4. So if you have an app and you're measuring that would be a screen, not a page. But yeah, if you go to that page and screens report, you'll see that's where you can find your blog data. And then, you do the same thing you always did. You'll have to like filter or segment by, /blog, or however you have it listed in your directory.
And I do feel like this was a little bit more difficult than it was previously, because before you'd have that little search bar in a really obvious place. And now you have to go over to the right and, choose a filter parameter where, that includes, like path includes, and then, like your /blog. So I feel like it made it a little bit more difficult for folks who are not
you can
used to filtering.
They moved some of those filters around. There's a little bit of a learning curve to figure out how those filters work. You still kind of have, so it's weird. So the thing that you're talking about from UA, what they did is they kind of split it up. So they have part of it, the functionality, in it's like a little blue plus. Is it?
Yeah.
Or no, it's right above. There's like a little magnifying glass thing. They've made the design so elegant you can barely see it. But so that does part of the search. So if you go into that and just type in blog, it'll sort everything by blog.
Oh, cool.
If you need to do slightly more advanced filtering that maybe has like a regular expression or something, then you have to go to the right-hand side and set up one of those filters that you're talking about. And
see, I made it hard for me, is what I just heard. And so I'm very excited I mentioned
it. Well, I'll have to show you how to do it. But it's not great though. It doesn't work exactly the same as it did in UA. And that can be frustrating if you used that feature often, because a lot of the, here's an example. You can't do an or search. So if I wanted to do, I don't know, blog pages or service pages, and then I, use the pipe for that in that filter, it would pull up nothing, because it doesn't do regular expression. So I don't know. Maybe everybody listening may not know what that is, but, just know that it's not as good as it used to be.
Gotcha. Well, we can't have everything be better. That would be, that would be unlikely in this modern world that would happen. So what are some of the common pitfalls to avoid when you're getting started with Google Analytics? Are there things that you see people, like, are people messing up their reporting by messing around in Tag Manager when they don't know what they're doing? Or are they, what are some of the things that you're seeing people do? Because I got to tell you, I hesitate to tell our non-technical people to use Tag Manager, even though I understand that it's probably, a good way to optimize what you're doing. But I just worry that it's such an opportunity for people who don't know what they don't know to actually ruin their reporting. So is that a valid fear that I'm having? And if, and if, regardless of whether it is or not, what are some of the other things you're seeing that people are kind of stepping in a little bit with
Yeah.
these new implementations?
So there's a couple things there. I mean, anytime you give somebody the keys to the car, there's potential for problems. Yeah, it's not. They always Google always said or promoted Tag Manager as like this tool for marketers, making it easy for you to make changes to your site. And that's only partially true because Tag Manager can get pretty technical.
Yeah.
And you have to set up like the thing that you want to fire, and then you have to give like conditions where that thing will happen. And usually it's the conditions part that people mess up.
Yeah.
So like they'll try to set up a newsletter sign up, and then I look in their data and it's 0. So I'm like, okay, it hasn't measured anything for the last 6 months. And then I dig a little bit deeper, and it's like, oh yeah, you set up the conditions wrong. The trigger is wrong. So simple things like that. We mentioned like UTM tagging.
Mm-hmm.
That's no different now than it was on UA. If you mess that up, you'll trash your traffic source reports.
And I've seen that happen quite a bit. People who are well-intentioned, but use the same, let's say the same word or two as, a source and a medium and a campaign name. And then suddenly all of your data is bad and wrong and you can't do anything with it. And that's heartbreaking.
Yeah. So you have to understand how the UTM tagging kind of works at a high level, and then just set up a process of how you want to, tag everything. Are you going to call Facebook.com or Facebook or FB or, like, what are you going to call it? And then just stick with that, so there's setting up conventions for tagging. Trying to think of another thing that, okay. So one thing that's more of a interface setting that can mess up your data if you don't get it right. There's an area called data retention. And so GA4 focuses a lot on data privacy. And part of the way they're doing that is they're not retaining data as long as they used to.
Yeah.
So you have 2 options now. And in that data retention setting, one of the options is 2 months, which I think is the default. And then the other choice is 14 months. So everyone should go in there and verify that that is set to 14 months.
Or you're not doing year-over-year comparisons.
Exactly. Now, there's also a little nuance to this too. That setting doesn't affect the standard reports.
Okay.
So your standard reports, you can go back as far in time as you want. It doesn't matter what that setting's at. But where it affects things is in the explorations. So if you want to do any kind of custom reporting in that exploration section, if you want to look back farther than 2 months, then you need that setting to be at 14.
Good point.
And I knew those settings, but I really didn't understand the effect of it until I was in there trying to create a report. And then I tried to look back, like, I don't know, say what's 2 years? So say 24 months.
Yeah.
And then I went and the date range won't let you do it. And then I went, oh, because it's only 14. And then that's when you go, oh, okay.
There go those, trends, year-over-year trends since the inception of, a blog or website, which frankly is probably a good thing because we so frequently redesign web properties that if you're trying to compare, you're not comparing apples to apples at a certain point. So you can kind of get a false sense of reassurance from your data.
Yeah, that's something to always keep in mind. And I would like a lot of times people will track any kind of changes and stuff, whether it's a tech change to your site or I don't know, maybe specific events, like in like real world events, like, content marketing world or something. You used to be able to put annotations into your analytics.
Yeah, I used to do that.
Yeah. So then when you were going back in time and trying to debug something like, well, why did I see this big spike or this drop off? And then you had a little note there that said, oh, this is when we switched platforms or whatever the case might be. Well, now you don't have that. They haven't added that feature in. So you kind of have to do it manually. Like
Yeah.
I'm just literally doing it in a spreadsheet right now,
Yeah.
which is kind of a pain, but it helps with debugging.
Yeah.
Um,
Before we move on, we did get a question from
yeah,
one of the folks that is watching us on LinkedIn, from
all
Marcelo
right.
Vargas. They asked, "Is that why my explorations are giving me this exploration includes an invalid date range message?"
Most likely, yeah. I can't remember what the message says, Marcella, but I think that's probably what it says. And you can test it. So like look at the range you've set up. So say it's 16 months, and if you get that message, then shrink it to, whatever, do like 3 months. And then if all of a sudden it works, then you know that it's probably due to that setting.
Yeah. So I feel like we've done a good job of kind of navigating where to get started and some of the things to watch out for. But I'd love to hear, because you are a data geek, you're a nerd, you're a certified marketing nerd. I want to hear what some of the maybe lesser used GA4 features are that you think content marketers should take some time to actually learn about, maybe even watch a how-to video or read an article, because they're things that like really got you excited as somebody who is interested in what you can learn and do to improve your content marketing.
Yeah, I mean, I guess some of it depends on where you're going to be looking at your data. So, like if you're going into the GA4 interface and looking at the standard reports, um, those customization features are actually pretty cool because you could, I think by default, I don't know, there's something like maybe 15 reports in there, like on the left hand navigation. You could go in and if you only cared about 3 reports, you could delete. Well, you're not technically deleting them. You can remove, all the reports you don't want to use, and just have those 3 reports on your left hand navigation. So like you can really cut out the fat and kind of streamline your reporting. Same thing when you go into the actual tables of data. So like I think I said the default, there's like 10 columns of data. Most of them are kind of useless. So like I'll go in and delete like half of those so that you only have maybe like 5 columns of data. So you
Yeah,
can really cut out a
better.
lot of the noise, which I
Yeah.
think can be useful for people. Um, those, if you go into, I talked a little bit about those exploration reports. Those can be super useful for looking at the path that you want to see. So if you're trying to figure out how people get to your content or maybe what they do after looking at your content, it's a pretty powerful way to do that. You can also, I think it's called a funnel report in that section. So if you have a specific set of pages that you want to know how people are moving, you can set that up. That's usually more common in like an e-commerce environment.
Mhm.
But you can also do it with a non-e-commerce site. Um, Content marketers should. This isn't really different than UA, but people might forget to do it. You can still link Search Console to GA4. So that's a powerful thing to. If you link Search Console, it'll then pull in that data into GA4, and that gives you the actual keywords that people typed into Google search that then ended up on your site, and the actual pages that they they entered on. So for a content marketer, that's
That's
gold.
gold. James.
So that's probably one that I would make sure. And there's a couple steps. I guess there's one additional step to setting that up than there was in UA. But that's definitely something that content marketers should do.
You
I guess
mentioned Looker Studio. I feel like they changed the integration for that. So I'd love to hear, is that still something that we should be using?
You just need to, so if you had a Looker Studio report that you were using, that would have been, the data source would have been connected to Universal Analytics. So now you have to add the GA4 data source to all of the elements of your dashboard, and kind of swap that out. And because it's not there is some modification of your dashboard because it is a different platform. But if you are familiar at all with Looker, you're comfortable setting up some things, adding tables and, some basic things, you can probably figure it out and get your dashboard converted over to a GA4 one. But that's the additional step where you can do a lot of cool stuff in there. And it's almost like, so when I used UA, I used to use a lot of the visuals that they had in there as I was kind of doing analysis and just quick reporting.
Same.
But they have gotten rid of a lot of the stuff that I used to like. And it seems like some of that functionality is now easier in Looker.
Awesome.
So there's this balance of, again, it goes back to what do you need to be able to do? What are those questions you want to answer?
Your audience.
And then, how do you filter that stuff? Who's the audience for these reports? But there's a lot of cool stuff you can do in Looker. So, you've got this whole ecosystem. You've got Tag Manager, GA4, and Looker, and those three kind of all work together to help you do the best measurement possible.
Yeah. Sounds like we've got some homework, unfortunately.
Hey, that's why
you're in business.
Why they keep knocking on my door.
Totally.
Because nobody else wants to do it.
We just want it automagically to happen, Kyle. You know that.
Yes.
Speaking of things that we wish would automagically happen, why don't we talk a little bit about some of the routine maintenance that marketers need to do when working in GA4? Because, I feel like there are a lot of little things that if you don't go in there and clean things up from time to time, or, set things like so that you're not having your development team ruining your analytics by things that they're doing, for example, I feel like there are just a few little things, that folks do need to be aware of about kind of routine maintenance. So I'd love to get your take on that.
Yeah, it's always a tricky one because, a lot of it comes down to, who owns the analytics, Is it the marketing team? Is it the web dev team or IT and unfortunately, a lot of the ways these things are measured. So like, say I had a newsletter event sign up tag that was firing from Tag Manager. Well, and if I'm basing that off the URL, like the thank you page URL, if somebody goes in and changes that URL, now that's going to break my conversion.
Yeah.
So I think the only thing you can really do is kind of monitor your top, conversions, those KPIs, I guess, maybe once a week, once a month. Just make sure they haven't flatlined, because usually that's a sign that something broke. Like if I see a bunch of zeros when I'm looking at an account, I'll usually try to widen the time range to figure out where it dropped off. And then I'm like, okay, what happened on that day?
Yeah.
And that's where those annotations would be helpful. people would put in a note like, "Oh yeah, I published a new thank you page," or
Oh, hey, we let somebody new into the tag manager account.
yeah, yeah. So, just making sure that you're regularly looking at your key things, that's one line of defense. Um Trying to think what else. You can actually set up uh, I don't know what I don't know what they call the feature in GA4, but in UA they had alerts
Mhm.
that you could set up, based on certain
Like abnormal
conditions.
activity.
You could get an email. You can still do that now, but it's buried in the menus, and I don't even think they call it alerts anymore. But
Yeah, I don't know I must have it turned on one of my
yeah,
accounts somehow, because occasionally I'll get, an email that says, "Hey, we've had a lot more traffic than we would expect on this page." And I'll be like, "Woohoo, that means that people liked the webinar I just gave," for example, so it's great, but I'm like, I have no idea, when it fires those off, but it's
yeah,
certainly
and
nice
you
to
can
know.
set up. I think they have ones. So they use a lot of machine learning now
Mhm.
in GA4, and one of the things it does is it looks for like anomalies. So if there's drops or spikes in
Yeah,
specific metrics, then it might tell you like, "Hey, we saw a huge traffic increase," um, or something.
yeah,
And when you're regularly monitoring your data, keep an eye out for big spikes, like you mentioned, because sometimes that could be spam.
yeah,
Um, I've they're trying to filter out a lot of the spam before it comes into your analytics. I don't know if they've gotten better or not, maybe slightly better, but I still see a lot of analytics where I'll see big spikes, maybe like once a month or something. And
yeah.
then when I try to look at that traffic source, it's
It's spam-based
either
pops up
direct
and
or
thinks
it's a
it's yeah,
nonsense source, and so then you have to try to remove that stuff because it's not valid customers going to your
yeah,
site. So it feels like we're always chasing that. um
yeah. Is there
so
anything we can do to remediate it if we end up in a situation where we do have bad data in there? I mean, obviously, if you have spammers targeting a URL, you can, disavow those links. But like, what can you do? Um,
you just have to try to go in and filter it. So
yeah,
if you're pulling a report for the last month and you had some traffic from a bogus source, if you can somehow isolate that source, then
yeah,
you could, in Looker or in GA4, add an exclude filter.
yeah.
It's
And
just
that's
you
so
just have
important
to.
because otherwise it can look like your results tanked, versus the prior quarter. But in
Well,
fact, the
and
prior quarter, maybe you were being spam attacked.
that's a great point. And I've had to try to figure that out a bunch of times because somebody will be like, "Well, why did we see this huge drop?" And then I go back and look at that previous quarter, year over year, whatever, and I
Yeah,
see that it was inflated falsely. And then I have to explain, okay, we didn't catch this, and so you're
yeah,
constantly chasing the spammers, I think. Um, and a lot of that stuff is easier to filter out in Looker Studio. Um, so some of that stuff I like to do more in Looker because it's just
yep,
easier to do the filters.
makes sense.
Um, One other thing that I just thought of, like a gotcha, and this isn't different than UA, but pulling PII into your analytics, so personally identifiable information. You still can't pull that into analytics. It's against
Yeah,
Google's terms of service. And also, a lot of people, your clients might not want their names and email addresses and things like that, in Google's database.
yeah, it's fair.
So checking regularly for email addresses, phone numbers, I've even seen like login and passwords pulled in before. So
Yikes.
they did add a cool feature though, actually just about a month ago. They added a redaction feature. I can't remember if it's on by default, but you can, if an email address gets pulled into GA4, you can turn on this redaction and it'll like, redact it.
Cool.
And then if you have additional parameters, that show up as queries, like in the URL,
Mm-hmm.
you can add those to, first name, last name, phone, whatever it is, and it'll wipe those out too. So they are taking steps to, keep people's personal data out of their tool.
Finally, that's good. We are just about out of time, but I'm sure that this conversation, you gave a lot of really interesting, juicy tidbits that folks are going to be able to do if they can get in there and spend a little time with GA4. But where would you recommend that they go to get more resources to learn more about what they can get done in Google Analytics? And of course, do you have any tutorials that you've written? Because I know I need some.
So there's a ton of great free and paid content out of there, just out in the wild. So a couple of the sites that I regularly monitor and have taken classes from, there's one called Data Driven U. They have a lot of analytics classes. CXL, they have all kinds of digital marketing classes, but they have a very good GA4 class. There's a site called Analytics Mania, which is very good. Measurementmarketing.io is excellent. And then two more. There's one called Measure School, and then Trust Insights is excellent too. So all of those are good. In fact, I think I've taken classes, like paid classes, from all of them. And it's hard to say like what's the best one, because some of it depends on like your level of skill coming into it. But I find they're all useful. And most of the classes that you might buy online, like I said, if you don't have the budget, there's tons of free stuff. It's just more of a pain when you're going through YouTube videos and things like that. But if you do have it in your budget to take some paid courses, most of those classes, I think, will run anywhere between like 500 and maybe 1,000. I can't remember on the high end where they go, but I think that's the quickest way to learn this stuff if you really have a need to be in there and regularly using GA4, maybe using Tag Manager or Looker. I think going the paid route is a good way to go, and any of those sites are excellent.
Excellent. So for anybody who wants to follow you and learn more about what you do and see your insights when things that are interesting pop up in the Google Analytics world, where can they find you online?
LinkedIn is probably the easiest place to find me. Also, I have my own email newsletter that I send out. It's just at my website, kyleakerman.com/newsletter. And, that comes out a couple times a week, just trying to help people with, understand GA4 and, higher level measurement strategies and reporting and that kind of thing. And I kind of help. I'm tailoring my newsletter content around like small marketing teams, because that's a lot of who I work with, and I think they need the most help. So if that fits any of your audience, then you definitely might want to check out my newsletter.
Fantastic. And we'll be sure in the recap on the blog to include all those links that you mentioned.
Yeah.
So if you don't mind sending them to Alec, he will make sure that we get them all in there. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking an hour of your day to share all of this. I think we've given folks a lot of great food for thought, but most importantly, thank you for giving them a place to get started. So that way we can move from Google Analytics for seeming like this, big, scary new thing that we have to figure out to being something that's worth figuring out, because it'll actually help us prove why we need content marketing. So thank you so much.
Yeah, no, you're welcome. And yeah, I think getting started is the key, so if you can if everybody can carve out, even if it's just like 30 minutes a week to kind of start to play around with GA4, start with those reports that are most valuable to you, and then obviously identify, those questions you want to be able to answer. And that's just a good starting point, and then build off there, but there is a learning curve, and, you have to invest some time to get better at it. That's the only way. There's no shortcut.
100%. And thank you, Monica. I was so glad that you found this session to be helpful.
Yeah,
and,
thanks for joining, Monica.
Yeah, and we'll be putting this on the blog soon. So stay tuned, and you can ask any questions. If they come up, you can ask them of Kyle and me here on the page on LinkedIn or over on the blog once it's up. So thanks again, and we'll see you all next week. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.